All right, welcome to another session, part of combat training. So I'm going to jump straight into this. You can see there's been quite a few changes since the previous video, and I took the liberty of just improving the UI and a bunch of other things in terms of creating the repository and the files associated with the repository so that each file has a name and it's labeled correctly, just so that those things are kind of ironed out and done. And then in terms of the UI, I've just basically created this, what I call is the dojo, which is kind of like a playground. And the idea here is that you can load a repository, or basically select a repository, and then you can see the files for the repository in this kind of very basic folder structure. And if you click a file, then it loads that file into the editor here. And yeah, this is a very basic version of what I'm trying to build out is as a sort of studio to play around with the different files in the repository. And what I'm going to do now is work on prompting and taking these file inputs here, or file values, and using them to ask questions and basically just create some basic prompts. So just if you want to see what the changes were that I made, you can actually see it in the V5 branch, which will be merged in, but you can always go back and see those exact changes. Basically, I just did some tidying up. So I moved the Docker file into the main folder, the root of the project, and then I just upgraded a few packages like Prisma, Trigger, and then installed a logging package called Pino or Pino. I have no idea how you say it, but it's a logging package. And basically, I'm going to start using this to eventually have more and more logs so that I can at least keep track of what's going on when it's deployed, which I'm going to do soon. Then there's a migration which adds the column name and relative path to the file. And basically what that is done is so that you have the actual file name, which for example, would be build.zig is the file name, but the path to that file is going to be the repository name /example /build.zig, right? And then there's also the URL, which is for where the file is stored in min.io. So a few things that need to be tracked there. This is the tree renderer, which basically renders out this list of files. And then just some menus, some layout stuff. So a lot of it is layout. And then there's a context, which is to fetch data here in this repo context or dojo context, which basically stores the repository and the file that's selected and loads it into this editor. And so I decided to opt for basically making it kind of like a single page app. So you have this dojo, that's it. You can't navigate anywhere. If you want to add a new repository, it just creates the modal here or dialog, and everything is done inside the dojo in this one page. So you don't navigate anywhere, and that gives it more of an app feel, which is why I'm going with this context to store the state for the dojo. So being the repo, the file, and then some other state and things like keyboard handlers, all that sort of stuff, event handlers. This is logging, and then just some fixes to create all the different things that I've been talking about. So that's that. Maybe one thing I can note here is also when I actually list out the files. It was somewhere here, but I think I scrolled past it now. Basically here, so I'm not including the .git files because otherwise you would have a whole bunch of Git files that are not related to the actual repository, so you don't want to show those. So I'm filtering those out because they do get added when you clone the repository. Maybe you could optimize that and just not add them as files, which would probably be better. But yeah, so not including that when I fetch all the files. And then here we're reading the file locally. This is also something that I've been thinking about, is whether or not to read it locally or from MinIO. I did initially opt for MinIO because we're probably not going to store all the files on the server. That's the whole point of having them in MinIO in the first place. But it is much faster to read it locally than to read it from MinIO. So depending on how you wanted to set this up, if you were running this locally, I guess still you'd probably, it depends on what you want. You could argue that it should still be fetched from MinIO. But I did initially try to read it from MinIO, but I realized it was a stream, and then I kind of just went for the simple approach for now to just take the buffer, which is the whole file, and return it like that. So this can be changed later on. And so we're going to use this axflow, which is already installed, to handle the streaming. And this is just a basic example. So you have in this case it's OpenAI, but they support all these other models here, which is really cool. So what I was thinking about as well is, because right now we force you to have an OpenAI API key in order to run the project. And so instead, what I was thinking was somewhere here, you can set your model provider or LLM of choice and add your token, and then it will save the token here, instead of having to require you to run the project with an OpenAI token, right? Because maybe you don't want to use OpenAI. So that's one thing, but I'm just going to go with OpenAI for now because I just want to get something up. And so we're just going to basically do this. So I'm going to go straight into it because I think everything is installed. And yeah, so the only thing I want to double check is with React, which I think I should just use the React example here. So here they have these hooks, which gives you the types, and then the hook for use chat. And they actually have building client-side applications as an example there. So this is just the documentation. Let's go to building client applications. Okay, so the first thing is that they are going to require you to have some endpoint that you have to send a request to. So this is pretty easy with Next.js. You just have an endpoint to send a post request to with the query, and then streaming the tokens with the query. And then you get back a new stream JSON response. So this is kind of the boilerplate that you need to have an endpoint set up, and then you can use the hook, which will, I guess, by default, use API chat. Yeah. Using this response, and then you get all this stuff back: input, messages, on-chain, submit. Here they're using, so they have messages, and then messages will obviously render out all the messages as it comes in. Let's see. So messages has the role. So this is mimicking the exact type from OpenAI's API, having the role and the data, content, all that. And you can set initial messages, which I would prefer to do this on the server side. Okay, you can customize it, so that makes perfect sense. And you don't have to stream as well, so that's interesting. But I think we'll just try it with streaming. Okay. Okay, so we'll probably have to come back to this time after time just to follow along with it. But okay, so let's go start with like this here. Okay, so I'm going to need an endpoint. So let's just come over here. And this is going to be probably pages, because yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this in gRPC. So API, and I'll do, so what was it? Chat. It was API chat. What's going on here? Let's copy this. Okay, but this is probably on the later version of Next.js. So let me just get Next.js API endpoint example here, because I'm still on pages. So it's going to look slightly different. It's going to look like this. Okay. Now, this streaming response, I believe it should work, but we'll see if it has to be something like this. Okay, let's see. So we need the query, and let's just see. So this response data is the type of response. Let's just see, do they have streaming on here? So we're probably going to need to do this as well. Yeah, okay. So we're going to need to have a config. And let's see what else we can get here. Okay, request.query, an object containing query.string or query string. Yeah, okay. So here we can say query, and let's see. So the query that we're going to expect here, I imagine for now is just going to be, well, I mean, sure, we can log it out, but I'm imagining the query in the moment, for the moment, is just going to be a message. I think is, we'll just take the simplest example. So let's do it like this. Say params equals to request.query as, and then here I'm going to say message string. So this will be params.message, right? And so at the end, we're going to return. I wonder if we can actually return that. Okay, so I'm going to have to do this in the app folder. Okay, so messages. This is going to need to be an object content, params.message, role is user. We're going to have to add a first one though. So this will be content, you are a helpful bot. Role is going to be, you can just make it system. Name, this is all optional though. Okay, what else do we need here? Function call, name, okay, so that's all of those. What else do we need? Model. So model here, I'm just going to go, let's do 3.5 turbo. Okay, the rest of these are all optional. So we'll just go with that for now. Here, yeah, so here you've got API key, which, ideally we would take in the, we would fetch this from the user config. All right, so this would have the stored profile of their API key and also the LLM provider that they're using. Okay, so that's that there. So let's get rid of everything we don't need here. Let's go like this. Response data is not needed. Actually, what am I? I've got a mix of stuff here now. This is runtime on the edge. So let's just copy what we need here. Okay. All right, we need this part. And then return this at the end. Okay, let's see. So, we can say this is params, but okay. Right, so we have our post endpoint here. We don't have any duplicates, so that's good. And yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to do this here in this ask questions. All right, so if I search for that, ask questions. All right, the only thing that I need to do is just store the message and then have a function to send, to call the hook. So let's go back here. This was the first part there. Use chat. All right. So where's this come from? Use chat. Do we not have that installed? Looks like we actually don't have that installed. Okay, yeah, that was not installed. Okay, but that's fine. So yeah, we've done this on the server. And so this is the chat box here. I'm going to actually make use of this to make this a bit easier. So that will render the response basically. So use chat, let's import this. Okay. Why are we not able to import that? Use chat from axflow models React. All right. So input messages on change on submit. Let's just make sure we're using this in the right place. Dojo. So this is ask questions here. So I'm going to make another component that renders that part out. Let's call it, yeah, something like that. Well, actually, no. This will be, let's do, okay, response render it is. And then let's go grab this part again. So this is the chat box. Okay, messages. What's the issue here? Prefer using an optional chain instead. That's more concise. Can we change the optional chain? Yep. All right. So the chat box is actually it's more of a messages renderer, but that's fine. So let's do that part at the end, I think. So we'll say wrap this like this. Chat box, which I'm going to call message. Actually, yeah, chat. Okay, chat box it is. Chat box takes messages, which is what comes from here. So we can pass messages in like that. Okay, so we have text area. Probably going to want to put a little bit of padding on this, but let's see what we get here. So response renderer needs to come in over here. Okay, response renderer. Let's see what we got here. Hydration failed because this is not a client-side rendered component. So let's do this. Components, chat box. Paste this here. Export this. Use client. Okay, then I need to import this. All right. And okay, so we have something over here. This is very big. Let's see if we can just fix this up a little bit. I think this should actually go below that. Min height 400 pixels, probably not the best. So I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. Make it 200. And then this is what I actually think this should be with that class like that. And then this should be 400. Yep. All right, there we go. Okay, so we have this that's hideful. This is ask questions. And then here, I'm going to say messages.length is equal to 0. And we can just say no messages yet. Okay. And just add some padding on here. All right. So those are the messages. Input, we can say is the value here. On change is going to be on change. So that makes perfect sense. And then on submit. So if I come over here, that's working fine. And then I need the submit button, which I think if we just, is it actually here? Submit? Yeah, it is. Okay. So I'm going to take all of that because it's not meant to be there anyway. Put this over here. And we can just improve the styling a little bit. So and probably gonna need to do this. Yeah, all right. So ask questions probably doesn't need to be this big either. All right. So at this point, I mean, ideally what would happen is you could select text and then you could include this in the prompt, or you could, do some kind of interactive prompt with the code, which is something that will come down the line. But right now, I'm just going to get it to submit with basic questions and then rendering the response in here. So on submit is going to be this here. So we'll say on click is going to be on submit, but maybe this is this. It requires, does it require a form event? It does. So if we change this to a form, and then move this here, submit. Okay. And then this needs to be a submit button. The secondary one I'm going to get rid of. Let's see what we got here. And okay, so let's give that a try. Write a one line haiku. And let's see, what did we get here? API chat, there's a 400 error here. Not found. API chat. This is probably does not include a handler, and I think this is just because of the version that I'm on. Okay, I think I know what this is. I need to create chat, put this in here and call this route.ts. I think that's what I have to do. Let's go back. Okay, so that I can close. Let's come back here. Okay, 500 is better. undefined. Okay, so this, right, okay, this is because it does not have any messages. Correct. Okay, so yeah, we should get rid of this. Okay, so, okay, yeah, it's because I was not including the correct part there. So this URL for bot, okay, content, which is going to be like this. I actually think okay, message type, you can import that. All right. Okay, so can I just do it straight like this then? So messages, and we can take all of that. We can print the messages and then do ... messages. All right. So I was just not accessing the correct value there. So let's do write one line haiku again. And let's see if we get a response. Okay, hold on. Okay, yeah, that was just the page reloading. So on submit, I mean, I would have hoped that this did not have to be done, but here we are. Okay. So let's do this again. Alrighty. So finally have a response. Which is good. What would be great is, and I think I'm not going to do this in this video, but what would be a good addition on top, or kind of building on top of this, is to then take this selected text, and then you'd have to store, I guess you'd have to store the selected text somehow, or you could kind of do something where, if I research ShadCN again, do something like this. I just want to find, I think it's context menu. Yeah. So when you like right click on something, I think what would be pretty cool is if you highlight this, hopefully you could then right click on the text, which I think is possible, right? Right click here. So if you just wrapped this around, I mean, we could try this right now. Like, let's try this right now. Let's go back here. This is response renderer. With the questions here, let's go to, okay, but this is the Dojo repo selector. Where is file viewer? Yeah. All right. File viewer. So let's okay, first paste everything, and then do this. Hopefully I can just do that. Yes, okay. So this will be our context menu wrapper. Well, I guess, yeah, okay. Context menu wrapper, where I'm going to say children. Thank you. Okay. And then the children will be inside here like that. This class name I'm going to remove. And then the wrapper is going to go around the text area. Okay. So we get this. Text area is a value, and I think this should be fine. I'm probably going to need to do something to make this full. Okay, yeah, the width is 64. Let's make this full there. No. All right, there we go. Okay, let's see. Does that look like it's performing okay? Yeah, so I mean, yeah, you can see it's not really perfect because you're right-clicking on this sort of window, not really the text itself. So I'm going to need to look into that, how you can just add a kind of context menu on the selected text, because what I would then have here is like, you know, you could say add to chat, right? And then it would pre-populate a message here and then say, well, we'll have to see how it works with the pre-populating the message. That, or because this window is rendering messages that are coming from axflow's response. So the component would need to be a bit smarter, where I think instead of just rendering out, let's go back here, response renderer, all right, because, no, chat box. Because this is just rendering messages. So what you'd need to have here is some sort of like use Dojo, and you'd have to get like a chat state, or some kind of state that you are storing all of the context, basically. So I guess you could just call this, you know, context, and then you would right click here, add to context, and that context would then show up here, and then you could then go and say, you know, context.map or something, whatever that type is. And then it would then display here. It wouldn't be an actual message because you haven't sent it yet, but at least it shows you what you've added to context. Kind of like here, because I'm using cursor. If I select all of this and then go Command L, then it does this, and it shows you a window of all the code that you selected. And then you can ask it anything using this as context, and it provides like the file name, and you can do other things. Like if I do @ then I can add these things into the context window. So that's where this is heading. If you just wanted an idea of how I was going to approach this, so storing that context in the Dojo state, pulling it out here, displaying it in the message window. Then you can ask a question which will include that context in the message, and then hopefully the response is decent. And then you can also go from there to say like, what is the file name being, or the name of the file that you're including the text from, so that it knows what file it is. And maybe then you can do functions to then read from other files to get more context based on what you're asking. But that's down the road. So yeah, that is where I'm going to leave this tutorial at. I did have a what is this called? Excalidraw. I did have an Excalidraw, but I've lost the state on that, but I do have a picture, because basically where we were at was prompting against the DB. This was the end of the previous video. And different prompts and asking questions. So on prompting against the DB, this is not exactly what I just talked about. Maybe a better example of that would be just saying like include a file, or doing sort of quick actions here to say include a file. And then you're not going to include the text in the message directly in the streaming here. Instead of that, you would fetch the file here and then do it all server side, which makes the load here a bit easier. So that's not really what I was talking about now, though. Where is this? Prompting against the DB. Selecting files as raw context is kind of what I was just talking about, and then different prompts and asking questions is also what I was talking about. So we're kind of like in the middle of this, halfway through this. Hopefully in the next video I'll at least have different prompts and selecting files and selecting raw file context as context, and then the prompting against the DB is also kind of just an extension from that. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.